Record progress.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Rebecca Wright, Chair of Computer Science at Barnard, and we're here for our computer science seminar today, and really excited to have Dr. Alexandra Kitson with us today from Simon Fraser University, where she is a multidisciplinary researcher at the School of Interactive Arts and Technology. Her work focuses on designing, developing, and evaluating emerging technologies such as XR, AI, and wearable systems to promote health and well-being, and has published in top venues as well as received awards from things like ACM Chi, IEEE VR, and NeurIPS. And she will be talking to us today about her work addressing real-world applications through community-engaged research. So, Alexandra, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. Okay, so hi everyone. Today in my talk, I'll talk a bit about me and my background because I think it's important to understand where I come from geographically, and also my academic background and how that has shaped my research and teaching. I'll talk a bit about the research questions that I'm interested in, the theory that I use in my work. I'll do 2 projects just to highlight the kind of breadth of research that I do. I'll highlight some student projects at the end and some of the teaching I do, and some future directions where I see I could be going towards at Barnard. So I'm from the, as Americans call it, Pacific Northwest, which is just like the west coast of Canada. This is from Vancouver Island in British Columbia, and that's where I grew up. So it's just surrounded by nature and trees and small communities. So my town had 2,000 people, really small. And I went to school in Vancouver. My background is in psychology and computer science and philosophy. So I was trying to bring in different disciplines already really early in my career. And then I went to the School of Interactive Arts and Technology for my PhD, where I focused more on human-computer interaction, HCI, and design, and trying to bridge all my different interests together. Great. Minimize? Sure, I can do that.
Hit that okay. Recording piece as well.
Okay,
Great.
all right. All these tech things. My motivation. So I used to volunteer at the Vancouver Crisis Center and Suicide Hotline for 7 years, where I took calls and also had an online chat, talked to folks from the lower mainland of Vancouver, also youth from Canada wide. So we were one of the first chat services in the country to talk to youth. And coming from the Canadian perspective, there's a lot of lack of access to mental health care. So although we do have access to physical health care, mental health care is not part of that. So it's a huge gap in our system. And there's a lot of systemic inequalities where folks don't have the means to, or it's so stigmatized in their community that they don't feel they're able to reach out and get help. And it's a huge burden also on our economic system, especially in Vancouver, where it's a kind of milder climate. We have a lot of people who come there looking for services and end up on the streets. So I was really seeing this day to day in my work at the Crisis Center, and I wanted to use my skills in computing to do something about it. So the primary research question that drives my work is how can we design, develop, and evaluate interactive technologies for social good and well-being? So how can we connect people to each other to strengthen our communities and use technology to give us more access and resources to different mental health technologies? Yuri. So what does it even mean to be, what is mental health or well-being in a technological world when we're surrounded by this tech. Even today, we all have our laptops and phones and things. What does digital well-being even mean? And so in my PhD, I set out to try and understand what it is we're talking about. And I looked at a lot of different areas, through economics, through engineering, through psychology, through HCI, and a lot of these were all saying similar things, just like in a different way, coming at it from like a different lens. And so in this paper, this review paper in Frontiers, I tried to bring this all together into some kind of conceptual framework that designers and developers could use as a means to ground their development in. And part of that was how I think of it is bringing in the theory from psychology, from HCI, even clinical theory, and bringing that together with practice-based experts. So always grounding it in lived experience of people and working with them, as well as the communities where this tech is deployed eventually. So it's really taking this, like triangulating and taking these three and bringing those together where we can come up with solutions that will work. Whenever I set out to do a project, I think of what is the logic model? What is the theory of change? Especially for something like mental health, I think it's really important to understand the underlying mechanisms that lead to the behavior change or that leads to a clinical outcome before going in with technology. Otherwise, and I see this a lot in HCI especially, we create some tech which we think might help people, it might give them positive emotions or something, but it's kind of missing this logic model. It's missing those pieces, those dominoes that line up where if you bring in tech into one piece, it will work. So here's an example of going input, process, output, outcome, and eventual impact, where you could develop you want to develop an app to improve people's fitness. And so you start with the people, those are the input and the mobile app, and they're not really into fitness. Bringing in the app, you have these activities and engagement features like a calendar, which could work with their schedule and slot in different times to exercise that works for them. The output is doing the exercise as scheduled. Calendar comes up, it's like, okay, time for that spin class. And then the outcome is, okay, now people are being active more, but then impact is like over time. If they keep doing this, then eventually that can improve fitness. So this kind of logic model, this top part, can really work for a lot of different design spaces, especially around health and well-being. In my paper, we were really interested in like feedback mechanisms as well. So here at the top, that's the theory going in to guide the interaction design and strategy elements. But you have here, this is the input, just like back here. This is the system, the interactivity and processes that are guided by theory. And then the output is the user's immediate state. So you could have some positive emotions in the moment while using a technology. For example, a breathing app, which helps you breathe more slowly, helps you feel more calm in the moment. And then over time, you can see that it can lead to different impacts, like feeling more present at a meeting, feeling more connected to people. So that's one of the papers I've done. And then how I use that theory in my different projects. I have quite a few projects. If you've looked at my website before, it's quite the breadth of projects, but also depth in specifically virtual reality and wearable tech. So I started doing virtual reality in 2012. You can see this is the Oculus, now Meta, before they were acquired. And our lab did the Kickstarter for them. And so this was super early days when we really needed to figure out the foundational research and um, doing a lot of the hardware of it. Like, we didn't even have controllers. So how do you move around this virtual space? So we were figuring out different locomotion systems. We were also trying to figure out, because a lot of people were getting sick quite quickly, trying to figure out different ways that we could mitigate that through the hardware and software in the design. And then in the VR set and setting, that was also about like exhibitions, or we were noticing if we just put people in a headset and then take them out, they were getting very disoriented. And that was because they were so disconnected from the reality that we share right now. And so we tried to use like museums as an example, as a way to slowly bring people into the virtual reality and transition them back out again. Sonic Cradle was another one, which wasn't like immersive visual VR, but it was a virtual soundscape. So virtual reality isn't just visuals, it's all of our different senses. And audio is one of them we explored, where people could change their breathing, which would change the soundscape around them while they're sitting in a nice hammock. After some of this kind of foundational work on exploring VR, I went into some applied applications. This first one is on how we can connect people in virtual spaces. And so you can have two people in a VR headset, and they don't have to be in the same room at all, but in the virtual space, they're connected through the tracked sensors and the cameras in the headset. And they're these particle bodies, which as they move closer or further away, they change colors and shapes and react in different ways. So that was quite a playful thing. And we demoed this at like the Vancouver Film Festival and the Richmond World Expo. So we also do a lot of like public exhibitions in my work. Odyssey was another one that was around connecting to the planet, and we wanted to have people think about climate change and how really we're all trying to save our world and planet. And so Odyssey was designed around that intention, where you would feel connected to the Earth. And astronauts experience this when they go into space. It's called the overview effect. And we tried to capture some of that by interviewing astronauts. And then we worked with a crew of cosmonauts who were training to go to Mars in an isolation study where they're like trapped for 6 months in a bunker somewhere. And we gave them this VR experience as a way to connect back to the planet and remember the intention of their mission. We also did some work around altered states in VR and trying to look at the parallels between different altered states of consciousness and different realities in VR. I thought it was quite interesting how in virtual reality, you're kind of aware that it's not real, but it feels quite real, almost like a dream. And so I'll talk a bit about that one. But for now, a little bit about these other ones on the bottom. That's my more recent work. So in my postdoc, I looked at the ethics of biowearable tech by working with middle schoolers. During COVID, we ran an online workshop where they assembled this kit. And then through video conferencing, we scaffolded the learning process of how you can design this, but then also had created these ethics design cards, which got them to reflect on the design decisions that go into these products and how that could impact their sense of self. So one example was this one girl, and she was part of this workshop, but she had a lot going on. She was on her way to basketball practice, and so she's on Zoom in our workshop with her kit, but in the backseat of the car on the way to a basketball game. And she's like pushing these different changes into her little wearable kit here. And there's this little LED display here, which changes in different ways. And initially she had it so there's this bar that goes up and down and you're supposed to match it with your breathing. She was doing that and I said, well, how does that make you feel? Do you feel ready for your basketball game? And she said, no, like I can't match it. I'm feeling so anxious. So then we worked through how to change that so it could work more for her. And so she changed it into a purple disco ball that was just glistening. And she was just breathing and watching that, and that made her a lot more calm right before her game. So that was cool. We've also done some work in high schools, and I'll talk more about this project too later in my talk, where we go in and talk about emotion regulation, and then how virtual reality could be a way to help with skills development. And then these last two are on kind of going back to my initial ones, like how can we develop the more foundational aspects of this technology? And I'm really excited about social virtual reality. So now we're seeing devices that can do different like personas. You might have seen Meta and Apple have these mixed reality personas that can be in your space, like right in front of you, and you can talk to this person like they're there. And then also different devices. So having cross device. So if you don't have a headset or you don't want to wear one, you could still interact with people who are, like through your phone or your laptop. So in this project, we were kind of exploring how that could look like in the future. And also for language learning, we looked at social virtual reality as a space where you can practice language learning with people. But then we're also curious in how LLM agents, who have gotten a lot better in recent years, could be another tool for that. Okay, so I'll talk about these two projects. So the first one is Lucid Loop, which is a neurofeedback augmented immersive experience. Lucid Loop is inspired by lucid dreaming, and you might have lucid dreamed before. So that's when you're dreaming and you realize that you're dreaming. And then you could just kind of watch your dream happen, you wake up, or sometimes you can even control your dreams. So you can potentially do whatever you want in your dreams. And I thought this was a very interesting experience that I wanted to do more of. It's like the ultimate virtual reality. But also I thought, well, maybe some of that could inspire a lucid or a virtual reality experience that could give people a kind of insight in how to do this. So I sought to look at what are the important design features that should go into this experience. There were two main skills to have more regular and sustained lucid dreams that we already knew of. So again, this is the theory going in, the theory of change. And that's practicing focused attention and mnemonic induction skills. And that's just like a memory aid. A lot of people will, throughout the day, just kind of pause and maybe look at their hands, look at their watch, look back again. These are kind of like reality checks to see if you're dreaming or not. Some people pinch themselves. Am I dreaming? So these are kinds of mnemonic devices. And then in what ways are lucid dreaming and VR kind of alike and dissimilar? Can we learn anything about it for design? So looking at the lived experience of people, so there was theory and now it's a lived experience. I interviewed expert lucid dreamers from around the world, and they had 20 years of lucid dreaming, like quite proficient. And we looked at phenomenological analysis. This is a kind of qualitative analysis to really understand what that experience is like and the things that lead to them becoming more lucid or not. And we translated those into different design considerations for Lucid Loop. And that was like it should have like a painterly aesthetic. Dreams for them were often quite realistic, but then sometimes at the edges or they would get lost in the dream, it would feel kind of surreal, also quite vivid in terms of like the quality of a dream. Some things feel really sharp while others are dull, more in the background, depending on what you're focused on. We brought in particles, forest, and some scarf dancers, because again, these were kind of natural settings plus a surreal element to it, which we thought could help people practice that kind of, oh, this is a dream. This isn't actually real. We also added in audio, like whispering as a mnemonic device to tell them, you know, next time you're dreaming, you'll have a lucid dream. And it was on a loop. So we shot this video on a loop. So you could keep playing it for however long you wanted, and it would be different. We decided to go no avatar in this one. Some people dream and they can see themselves or even from a third person. But most people in our interviews didn't have a body. And then different levels of abstraction. So we had different layers of realism and surrealism in this experience. This is some of the design process we did. So we took a Steve DePaula's Deep Dream painterly system, and we ran our 360 video through it and tried to look for, you know, a painterly aesthetic with vivid colors that seemed like it could go between real and surreal. And some of these are quite, you can't even make out what's happening, where others are more realistic. And so we had to choose from over 100 different ones like this. The input we decided on was a consumer EEG headset, the Muse 2, and it just looks at the electrical activity on your skull, which is associated with different brain states. And I just want to say it's very loosely tied to different emotional states like attention. It's not perfect. And that was okay for our experience because we were going for a more artistic angle. It wasn't meant to be any kind of like medical grade device. And we also went with a head-mounted display so that people could be really immersed in the visuals rather than like a projector system, and kind of block out and just focus on the experience itself. We had our deep dream visuals and spatialized audio as well. So the loop kind of looked like this, where people were seeing and hearing different things in the environments. And then it was looping up to this Muse Monitor app, which was taking the EEG data. And then we, using OSC, put that into the Oculus, a Unity program, where then we had our own like algorithms to filter it and turn it into a signal that we could map to the visuals and the sound in real time. The only thing that wasn't real time was the actual like visuals changing. We kind of had to fake that. So we created 7 different layers because we made this in 2017 and some of the generative AI stuff was not quite where it is now. But you can see the layers going from 1 to 7. These are just some samples where if you're more focused, your attention, the visuals are clearer, the sound is clearer, just like lucid dreamers. And then it gets more abstract, the more you lose focus. But then there's also some things in the environment for people to kind of pick up on and regain their focus. We also added some computer graphics on over top of this. So there were some like particle systems and different little animations that could pop up in and out as a surprise. So here is a little video kind of highlighting what this experience is like with some audio in the middle. We'll see if the audio works.
Yeah,
I turned it off.
I think the problem is this where the audio is on. So it's turn on. Let's start it again.
Next time I'm dreaming, just remember I'm dreaming. I'll remember I'm dreaming.
Great. So then after creating this based off of the expert interviews and some iterative design, we looked to some user experience research to see if the thing we made actually is doing the thing we wanted it to do. So we used a thing called a cued recall debrief, where it's a little bit different from having people talk aloud as they're using a product or a system. We get them to put on some, they can put on some sensors to capture physiological data or not. In our case, it was the EEG, which then also mapped to the visuals. But we just had them run through the experience without the need to think about like how they're going to tell us about it or comment as they're doing it, because I think that really takes you out of the experience for some things. And then instead play them back a recording of what they just experienced, and then they can narrate that as they go through it. So there's, you know, it's always tricky to kind of balance that where you don't want to have people look retrospectively at something, because sometimes you forget what the thing was after you experienced it, but you also don't want to take them out of the experience. So that's kind of an interesting different way to do that. And we also did some semi-structured interviews and questionnaires to get at their experience. So I really try and take like a multi-pronged approach to understanding something and measuring the outcomes. So some of the themes were, it was kind of like a psychedelic experience for some people, where you go into, some people felt a lot of fear and they didn't know what was happening. Their minds were going left, right, and center, and they were seeing that reflected in the visuals and sound. And some people said that rather than trying to freak out about it, they remembered like, oh, actually, if I just surrender to it and relax, everything's okay. There's also a sense of discovery. So, you know, you start to focus or concentrate, things zoom in on patterns or zoom out, things get louder or quieter. And for this participant, it was cool because they tried to do a certain thing and it did it as expected. So they're getting that feedback. So for us, it's like, okay, our system is kind of working as intended. Even though when I go back and look at the data and see like their brain states and how that's mapped, like I'm not sure it's exactly mapped to what they're thinking, but for them, they were reading into it. So also just, yeah, being there for them, it felt like they had some agency over the scene. I thought one participant said that there is a path and they wanted to go down the path, and they were making up different stories about the characters in the scene, just us researchers, but for them, they were putting their own interpretations onto a very kind of abstract environment. So I thought there's something there. That's cool. For the second research question, how are Lucid Loop and lucid dreams? How is VR and lucid dreaming related? The sense of fluidity was definitely something, moving through the different types of visuals and sounds. Everything is changing constantly, like in some dreams. Also the emotionality of it. So a lot of people, had fear. It was one of them, but also like peacefulness, calmness, connection to the forest and also to the people. A lot of people were questioning reality. So some people in the VR headset were thinking like, is this really doing what I think it's doing? Is this what my brain is doing right now? So they were kind of questioning reality in a way that in lucid dreams, you also question if the dream is real. And it was also quite reflective. So participants actually wrote to me after and said that experience made them think about different things in their life and also helped them become better lucid dreamers as well. So I haven't done a follow-up study to see if it actually induces more or persistent lucid dreams, but that would be a future study I'd be interested in. So this resulted in 4 papers at top HCI venues like ACM Chi, where we demoed it there. Also gone to MIT Media Lab, where we did a dream engineering workshop, which spawned a lot of different collaborations. And I'll show you one of the student projects at the end that also came about. And recently got a grant with a couple of dream engineers who work more in like the psychology, where we can develop a system that is using more generative AI rather than the deep dream that Lucid Loop was. It was also exhibited in Scotland and in France, also locally in Vancouver. Some different collaborations with researchers, training students, and all of the code that we created, so the filtering of the EEG data and mapping that to the visuals and audio is all open source. Find it on GitHub, and also was funded by my social science and humanities grant for my doctoral studies. Okay, second project was VR for emotion regulation with youth. So this is a little bit different, maybe a little less artistic, but now more applied to a certain mental health problem. This was my postdoc. It was very busy, I gotta say. We did a lot around the theory, trying to bring in different experts, also end users with youth. We had 3 different workshops that we ran over a year, an advisory group that we frequently checked in with. And now we're kind of at development and field study stage, so still ongoing work. And as I said earlier, youth are one of the particular populations who are most at risk for having mental health challenges. And in Canada, suicide is the third highest in the industrialized world. Wait times for counseling and to get help are really high. And this is a really pivotal key developmental stage for them, where learning emotion regulation skills is so crucial. If you learn it then those skills will really serve you later in life. So that's why we chose them. We're working, again, bringing in theory with James Gross's process model of emotion regulation, where he says that we identify an emotion, we select a strategy to change the emotion, we implement it, and then we check in ourselves to see if anything changed. If not, we might go through several cycles until we get our desired result. And there are different ways of regulating our emotions, and you can categorize them like this, but they're not strict categories. One of the ones I was most interested in is cognitive change. One, because it's one of the most studied, but also it's one of the most challenging, especially for youth, even us, we're still developing these skills. And cognitive change also has different types. And it's really, if a situation has already happened and you're feeling the negative emotion, you can use different cognitive strategies to kind of reframe a situation. So the situation is actually the same, but the way that you relate to it or think about it is different, and that can make us feel differently. For example, is feeling this way really that bad? Or I feel bad, but it shows that I care. So these are strategies that teens are still learning. And we looked at different psychological therapy manuals. So like over 40 therapy manuals we analyzed to try and understand this cognitive change process and the challenges within. But we realized also clinical practice isn't really captured in these books. So then we went to clinicians and interviewed them to more deeply understand the challenges. So then once we knew of the challenges, we're seeing some opportunities for virtual reality to come in. And virtual reality, I think, has three things that are really unique about it. It can immerse you, your whole senses, you can feel like you're really there, and you can also be embodied. So you can have an avatar and you can look around, pick up things, and it feels like you're with someone or really there in an environment. And in this way, it can really evoke a visceral experience, emotional experience, in a way that feels quite realistic, and you can simulate different experiences and try things out over and over again without the fear of actually failing in real life. It's good for teens. So we created these prototypes. See how this video goes. And these are different kinds of cognitive change strategies that are then
running. I want to run it with you.
Bop bop doobadee, go into a meeting, badoo bop boop.
In this room, we will try to uncover the emotions of the green player. Emotion starts with sensations in our bodies. Purple player, please press on the emojis that you have placed to pick a more nuanced emotion word. Can you resize the emotion balls to fit how much your friend has felt these emotions?
Great. So we created these 4 different prototypes. It was a team of 4 undergrad students and 1 PhD student helping with the project management. And so they came from different backgrounds. There was a psychologist, there was an engineer, there was a computer scientist, and there was an art and design student. And so I was able to lead them, and they all came up with these 4 different sprints, which they did over the summer. So each was only 2 weeks, and they were able to take the theory that I had taught them and implement them into these different very small prototypes, which we then could show students in our high school workshops as like potential things you could do with VR. So yeah, they're quite like low fidelity prototypes, but they do the job of showing like what's possible. We also use like tilt brush to incorporate it into our project. And yeah, I think that they learned a lot. So then we took those prototypes and we went into high schools where our goal was to identify opportunities for VR to support their skills development, the kind of challenges they faced from their perspective, so not the clinical perspective, and how they envisioned VR could help them. We had 3 kind of learning objectives where we wanted to sensitize them and upskill them on emotion regulation, as well as virtual reality features. We also wanted them to have some body-based reflection because VR is, you use your body a lot. You're moving around, it's 3D. So we want to see like, what could they use that for emotion regulation? And emotion is so embodied as well. So they seem to go really well together. And then look at design fiction activities or scenarios as a means to think about the challenges. So these were our 3 workshops and 3 different classes. They're from different diverse backgrounds. A lot of the below SES high schools were from like immigrant families. And we just tailored the activities around their kind of expertise. So for this one, it was more about like doing brainstorming and some UX, different design activities. Whereas this one was drama students, so we got them to do their drama activities. And we worked a lot with the instructor too, to make sure, keep the kids safe and us safe, and use some of her drama activities as part of our design collaboration. So some of the highlights from the different workshops, so you can see these ones. We got them to do like rock, paper, scissors with their bodies. That was one to get them more into their bodies. We had lots of discussions, whereas this one, we had similar activities, but the difference is here where doing drama activities, having different kinds of demos, and then acting out how they imagined VR could be as a skills development tool for emotion regulation in the future. These were some of the challenges that they came up with. So one was inflexible imagination. Sometimes it's hard to understand another person's point of view. So VR could maybe be that. They also thought that having a social experience would be really great because a lot of these emotionally charged situations are around their friend groups. They also like the idea of externalizing the inner self. So a lot of time there's a lot of stuff happening in our bodies and our emotions, and it's hard to deal with, especially for teens. Emotions are amplified. So if you can get that out there, sometimes that distance can really help you see the bigger picture. Sorry, let's see. Cognitive reappraisal. Yeah, so the cognitive change process. So we took these ideas from youth, and then we also did a scoping review of existing HCI interventions to see, okay, well, this is what teens want, and it's important to them. These are the reappraisal challenges, and these are the VR features they're most interested in. Where can we see some gaps where HCI is not covering that could be potentially viable? And we looked at cognitive reappraisal challenge themes, sub-themes, and we saw that yeah, being able to visualize what's happening in our bodies, having social experiences, and also personifying our emotions was an interesting avenue. In the paper I did at Kai this year, I came up with some just design fiction scenarios of what I imagine this could look like. And so those, you know, people can take them and go with them as they will, but I also want to explore that more in future work. So in terms of impact, we did 78 teens from diverse backgrounds, 5 teachers incorporated our concepts into their curriculum, also inspired multidisciplinary research projects with, I'm now working with BC Children's Hospital. and trained a bunch of students and had them create publications. So really trying to have impact inside and outside academia. I think I have a little bit more time to show 2 student projects. So I'll just talk about maybe this one, Future Earth. This was for my class, which is Earth Environments. It's a 4-year undergrad class for interactive arts and technology. In a previous animated class. And there are teams of 4, and there's a theme. So this social nature, climate awareness. So in this one, in the game, in virtual reality, you have a wasteland, robots, plants, and repopulate. They do this over, they have 7 weeks where they're learning and doing assignments, and then 7 weeks to do this. And then there's a project showcase at the end where we invite industry to look at it. So Mr. Ducks was, just wasn't here because I think it shows. So in this one, it wasn't really about, I think the theme was do something unique. It was very broad. And they played with the a short and tall, like a scale in VR. So the player had to like change their scale in order to complete the puzzles. That was kind of fun. And then grad student projects. So this one is actually today
Paragraph from the
at
movie
NeurIPS. I couldn't be there, and it's around using virtual reality, speaking into your hand, and there's an ear there, and you tell it your dream that you had, and then that translates it to text, feeds it into an LLM, which then creates these 3D meshes in virtual reality that you can play around with and scale and reflect on what these dream objects mean to you.
Elma T is a GPT-4-based embodied conversational.
Yes, it's an embodied
Paragraph
conversational
from the
agent.
movie Dune.
Who looks like this, and you can go into social virtual reality. That's VR chat, which is a really popular social VR platform, and talk to this agent and practice your English skills. So we ran a study with that.
Elma T is a.
So yeah, the kinds of future directions I'm looking to go in are still kind of in this like health applied space, but also in like fundamental virtual reality and computer graphics direction, where like how do we actually represent people in these digital spaces? How can they interact? What are they doing there? How do we represent them? And then how can we then co-create personalized mental health interventions? I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we can take some questions either in the room or on the Zoom. If you're on Zoom, you can raise your hand and we'll call on you and figure out if we can hear you when we do that. Also, you can type your question into the chat and we can read it out for you. Questions?
One question. So I think this is actually super interesting if we imagine, and I have people kind of looking a bit of the public health and the opioid epidemic, and then a lot of people that are actually in jails, and kind of having this experience of VR and placing that all of that and then having the outside experience. So I was trying to imagine this type of technology. How would you imagine that being? Because like they really cannot have interaction outside.
Yeah.
And then maybe like this type of
Yeah, absolutely. There was a project which unfortunately didn't go forward because of COVID, but it was a juvenile detention center of young girls, and we thought about bringing in virtual reality as a way to practice being in triggering spaces, because a lot of the time when they go back to their you know, they learn, they get treatment, then they go back to their environment, and then things fall apart. So how could you simulate that as much as possible in VR? And then we also thought about it as a mediator to talk to certain people, like family members or friends from a distance. Yeah, I think there's huge potential there. Mhm.
I'm really interested because I've
Yeah.
read a lot on like the NLP side, but I'm interested in the project on learning, like helping people using VR to kind of help them learn.
Yeah. So in that case, like with the last project, the student project I showed with the LLM, yeah, I'm super curious about that and how these embodied conversational agents could be like teachers or people we could practice certain skills with, be it language or interviewing or onboarding people, or like an assistant where you're situated in a certain space, and they can be kind of like your guide. I think I did see somebody last year did, like, if you're at a party and you're kind of nervous, you don't know how to interact with people, you could have this embodied conversational agent as your kind of wing person, I guess. So yeah, it's possible, I think. But what I was finding, especially with the LLMs, is after 10 minutes or so, things just they're done. Yeah.
That's what I was
Yeah.
actually curious to see how far they're gonna go.
About 10 minutes, and then things go weird. But yeah, I wonder, like, if you can bring in different models, so maybe they could switch at a certain point and they don't get too tired or whatever's happening. Yeah.
I guess I have a question about that as well. So in addition to the sort of going weird or hallucinations, even at their best, it feels like current LLM chatbots are fairly generic, like their language is fairly generic, their style is fairly generic. I just wonder if there's a worry if you use them as teaching tools, we're sort of gonna spiral all of humanity into this genericness where it learns from us and we learn from it. And
well, you can even see in like people's writing too, there are certain phrases that are now being more prevalent, which we don't normally speak like. So I think, yeah, it's very important to think of, like, yeah, what are we putting into these models? And maybe we don't need like an LLM necessarily, but like smaller language models where we know what we're inputting into these models and could be more helpful. Yeah.
I had a thought, I'm trying to formulate a question, but maybe I'll just say it aloud and we'll check the question.
Yeah.
But I thought the context you were describing of like social interaction seems really interesting from sort of like the mental health standpoint. And I was curious in your conversations with clinicians or psychologists, like where they kind of land on the spectrum of like virtual interactions as opposed to interacting with others, people within like other real people, I guess, within a virtual space. Because on the one hand, I think you brought up this idea of like repeatability, like you can have this sort of safe space to practice things, and maybe virtual avatars might be better for that. But then there's also sort of like the ethics of, you know, when you're interacting with something that is sort of like virtual, what does that mean in terms of people learning interactions when there might be limitations around like how fluent or expressive they can be and how much they relate to maybe conversations you might have with real humans. So just curious, like how did they think about that? Your conversations with the experts.
Yeah, it's a great question. And they're definitely cautious about any technology, like even using a phone. Like they're very traditional in that sense.
Face to face versus like remote, or
even using like remote counseling, for example. I think they would prefer face to face in person, but sometimes that's just not possible. And sometimes people have like phobias or things around being in person or talking to people one-on-one. So they said they see the potential of this technology as a kind of stepping stone or one tool that they could use in their already big toolbox, where people could, like, a first introduction, kind of like exposure therapy. It's like the first little exposure to practicing or with teens, you know, they don't want to take home a worksheet, for example, to, you know, write down your thoughts and what you felt. And it's like, they're not going to do that. But maybe if it was like a VR game where it's like built into something fun, they might be more inclined to do that. And so that kind of retention might appeal, I guess, to clinicians. Yeah.
Follow-up question, actually, because I was thinking about the news, like I saw something, I think it was this week around like a social robot for kids that was getting discontinued. Did you see this?
No.
I'll text you over a link.
Yeah.
Actually. This is a longer question, so I'll save it for that.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right, I think we'll end there. Alex, thank you again.
Thank you.
All right, thank you guys on Zoom. See you later.